Hello, everyone. Today we are continuing with our discussion of Unit 6 radical functions. And today we're going to review something that I know you did in 8th grade, and that's the Pythagorean theorem. So, in a right triangle, the side opposite the right angle is called the hypotenuse, is always the longest side. The other two sides are called the legs. So, I have my right triangle that I have down here. This side right here is my hypotenuse. And my other two sides are called the legs, the sides that make the right angle. So our theorem, if a triangle is a right triangle, then the square of the length of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the legs. So we refer to this as a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's important to remember that c always has to be the side across from the right angle. So example 1, find the missing side length. If necessary, round to the nearest hundredth. So I like to remember to start by labeling my legs. A and B are the ones that make the right angle, and across from the right angle is C. So I label the parts of my triangle, and then I write down my formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I substitute, so it's 10 squared plus 24 squared equals C squared. I now need to do my exponents first because order of operations says exponents first. So 10 squared is 100. 24 squared is 576 equals c squared. And now add those together, which is 676 equals c squared. And then the important thing is the opposite of squaring is to take the square root. So in order to find c, we need to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to say the square root of 676 equals c, which in this problem it told me to round to the nearest hundredth, which actually is 26. It's a perfect square. So example 2, find the missing length of a side. So again, I start off by labeling. Find my right angle. Across from the right angle is C. The other two legs are A and B. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I substitute, so that's 7 squared plus B squared equals 15 squared. I square all my numbers, so that's 49 plus B squared equals 225. I need to isolate the B squared before I can take square root. So to isolate the B squared, I subtract 49 from both sides. I get 176. And then the opposite of squaring is take square root. So B equals the square root of 176. Our direction said nearest hundredth. So I do the square root on my calculator. And I get 13.27 when rounded to the nearest hundredth. So I want you to pause, and I want you to try 1 and 2 and come back and check. So again, I labeled my triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Remember, c always has to be the side across from the right angle. I substituted. I did see 6 squared, which is 36. 8 squared is 64. I added 36 to 64, and I get 100. To get c, I take square root of 100, so c equals 10. Number 2, again, I labeled my triangle. Notice this time c is 16. So it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So it's a squared plus 12 squared equals 16 squared. I square 12 and square 16. I subtract 144 from both sides. A squared equals 112. The opposite of squaring is take square root. So a equals the square root of 112, rounded to the nearest tenth is 100th, is 10.58. So I want you to pause again and try 3 and 4. Okay, so number 3, again, I labeled my triangle. So C is 12 this time because it's across from the right angle. So it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So it's 2 squared plus b squared equals 12 squared. 2 squared is 4. 12 squared is 144. Subtract 4 from both sides. B squared equals 140. Take square root of 140, and it's 11.83 when rounded to the nearest hundredth. Number 4, I'm going to do the same thing. So C is across from the right angle. So it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A is the square root of 23. So I'm going to do the square root of 23 squared plus the square root of 5 squared equals c squared. Here you need to remember that the square root of a number squared is really just what I'm taking the square root of. So it's 23 plus 5 equals c squared. I add those together, so it's 28 equals c squared. And then take square root of 28 equals c. And our direction said nearest hundredth, so I take square root of 28 on my calculator, and it's 5.29. So now we're going to talk about the Pythagorean triple. So the Pythagorean triple is a group of 3 counting numbers that satisfy the equation a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where c is the greatest number. Some common examples are 3, 4, 5, 5, 12, 13. You can also multiply those to get another triple. So if I take 3, 4, 5 and multiply everything by 2, I get 6, 8, 10. So determine whether 9, 12, and 16 can be the lengths of the sides of a right triangle. So if it's the sides of a right triangle, that means it works in a squared plus b squared equals c squared. C always has to be the longest. So in this example, 16 is going to be C. So I'm going to do 9 squared plus 12 squared. And I want to see if that equals 16 squared. So I put a little question mark over the equal sign. So 9 squared is 81. 12 squared is 144. 16 squared is 256. Is 81 plus 144 266? Well, 81 plus 144 is 225. 225 is not equal to 256. Therefore, this is not a right triangle. So I want you to pause, and I want you to try 5 and 6. Or actually try 5, 6, and 7, and then we'll come back and do 8 together. So when I do number 5, it's 30 squared plus 40 squared equals 50 squared. 30 squared is 900. I forgot zeros. Is plus 1600 equals 2500. 900 plus 1600 does equal 2500. So the answer is yes, it's a right triangle. Number 6, it's 6 squared plus 12 squared equals 18 squared. 6 squared is 36. 12 squared is 144. 18 squared is 324. So 36 plus 144 equals 180, which is not equal to 324. So it is not a right triangle. Number 9 is 9 squared plus 40 squared. Is that equal to 41 squared? Well, 9 squared is 81. 40 squared is 1600. And 41 squared is 1681. Well, 1600 plus 81 equals 1681, so it's yes. So for number 8, first what we got to decide is where does the square root of 26 fit in the length of those. So the square root of 26 is approximately 5.9. We don't use that value other than to determine if it's the longest. So the longest is 12. So it's 4 squared plus the square root of 26 squared equals 12 squared. 4 squared is 16. Square root of 26 squared is 26 equals 144. 16 plus 26 is 42, which is not equal to 144. So this is not a right triangle. And let me fix some of my pen here. So that's the end of our video today. If you have any questions, please bring them to class.